And so you did a few years with Basis, clearly got a much deeper understanding, both sounds like from the commercial side, but also the depth and breadth of getting involved in that data and finding great insights. And then you make the move from agency side to client side. Was that also a natural progression or more considered?
I think slightly more considered. I think the same logic that I felt I'd learned a lot. I was maybe learning a bit less than I had at the start, wanted something new. And I'd heard from a few people that client side's different, it's fun, it's enjoyable. So I thought, okay, why not? I'll try that. There were quite a lot of different companies hiring. It's a tough market, and I didn't get that many. But the Met came up, and I thought that looked like an amazing role. And it has been a really good insight into how research works from both sides of the fence, you could say. I mean, it was very much doing the work at an agency, and now I'm commissioning it, doing it to some extent because we're quite a small team, which I'll come on to, but you do get to see it from different sides. And I think it's such a healthy thing to do if people can do both, because I genuinely remember the first meeting I had with an agency when I was at the Met in my first week, and I felt like I'd learnt more there about what makes a good agency and what makes a good presentation than I had 2 years agency side, which you think doesn't really make sense, but just immediately being on the other side, sure, I think gives you a perspective which is completely different.
And I imagine you have a lot of empathy as well for the agency world, the understanding of how that works.
Yeah, exactly. And I think going agency to client or client to agency, whatever order, I think is a massive benefit. And empathy is a good point to make, because quite often when you're agency side and you see a client and they say, can we have this by this date, you often think, oh, annoying client. But then when you're on the other side, you've realised that everyone's got their own pressures. That might be coming from a person very high up who needs it urgently. It's not necessarily the client's fault. They're just trying to do their best as well. So it does make you see the whole system together and think, okay, I see it might be an issue here, as opposed to this person is not doing their job very well.
Yeah. So the Met fascinates me, right? We can think about many big consumer brands, and it's really quite obvious what they might be wanting to research. I would love to understand as much as you can share. So to paint us a picture of the sort of work you're doing for the Met and how that's having a positive impact.
Yeah, so in the Insights team, we sit within a wider comms and engagement team, which is about 100 people.
Yeah.
And that encompasses a lot of different roles and areas of expertise. And our job in Insights is really just to make all of that a bit more evidence-based and a bit more effective. Sure. So that could be with the social media team, improving their comms that they put out on Instagram and TikTok, things like that. We've got a big internal comms team, which tells the 40,000 officers in the Met what's going on. That's a really important component as well. We do a lot of ad hoc campaigns like recruitment, which is obviously massive, because if you don't have the staff or the officers, then your organisation won't work. Yeah. We have a big press team. Something I hadn't realised, maybe naively until I joined, is that whenever you see in a newspaper article, the Met Police has said, that is someone, a human, responding, and, yes, and that's obviously a big decision as to what you say and how you say it, or whether you respond at all. So all of these different elements, it's our job to, I think, make them more effective. And as an organisation, I think the Met is fascinating, and I'll come on to talk about why, but from an Insights point of view, it's been really interesting because we're just 2 people, and I was really brought in to build the Insight function basically from scratch, which has been great. I mean, it's arguably not good because there's no frameworks or anything to use, but I would say it's been great precisely because there are no frameworks. So I've just been able to carve it out exactly as I wanted to, really. So came in, I thought we probably need to understand our comms a bit better. Let's create a comms tracker. Yeah. We need to understand how internal comms works, so we set up different frameworks that we can use to understand that. It gives you real license to create what you want and build it from the ground up. And using a lot of the agency experience I had, I thought, okay, I know what works better, what works a bit worse. I think that's one benefit of agency work, is that you do have quite a technical understanding of everything, and you've pitched to people, you've seen other techniques, other methods, so you know what works. So it's been a really fun experience. It's still very early days. I've only been there 7 months, and there's a lot more that I want to do, but it has been really fun building it from zero. And the other thing is, because it's so new, people are very receptive to it. And I think that's probably not always the case in other companies where you've got big established Insights team. People might often not want to hear it, or they think we've heard this before, whereas here, luckily everything we're doing is new and exciting, which makes the job a bit easier because, oh, this data looks great, can we have more?
Yeah.
And people are just really keen to hear it. So it's been a really, really fun experience.
I'd imagine, given the nature of the Met, you used a word earlier, providing evidence, right? That's pretty central to the core function of the Met. And also, I love the connection to the MRS with evidence matters and matters more than ever in the 80th anniversary year. Talk to us a little bit about what fascinates you about the Met.
Well, as an organisation, I mean, having worked with lots of private sector consumer brand companies, I think there the challenges are very much to do with competition and geographical expansion. So did a lot of work with Tesco before, and all they're concerned about, well, not all they're concerned, a lot of what they're concerned about are what are Aldi doing, what are Lidl doing, what are Sainsbury's doing. They've got quality, they've got value, we're being pushed on both, how can we respond?
Yeah.
They've also got to think about their different markets. They're big in the UK, but they're also big in other parts of the world. So there's just a lot more to think about. Whereas with the Met, there isn't any competition for good or for bad.
Yeah.
We're stuck with the Met. There's no geographical expansion because it's London based. The other thing on that is that there is a ton of good data out there provided by the government. So we know very clearly who our audience is in terms of London. We can split that into boroughs, into wards, different demographics. We have a really good sense of who our audience is. So in that way, it's the dream. It's a very, very contained problem, and you know who this audience is. But the downside is that, unlike other brands, the usage is not a good thing. And what I mean by that is, if you're Tesco, you want people to go into Tesco as often as possible, buy your brands and tell your friends about it. With the Met, if people are using the Met, it's probably not a good thing.
Sure.
It's the sort of thing where you actually don't really want to come into contact with the police because usually something bad has happened. So that makes it really interesting and really hard from an insights and commerce perspective because we're relying on people actually not coming into contact with the Met. So you're then thinking comms is such a big part of it because if like most people, you haven't been arrested, you haven't been a victim of a crime, then all you know about the Met is what you hear from news and from friends and family. So it does make it a lot harder because to some extent they're relying on factors that you can't control. So that's why I think it's interesting. It's almost the reverse of a lot of the companies I've worked with, and it does make that comms element really challenging because I think it's no surprise that if you hear things about the Met in the news, they're mostly negative. A lot of not only mainstream news sources, but social media sources are very disparaging towards the Met. I think a lot of it is not necessarily justified, some of it might be, but it really means that we as the Met have to put out quite a lot to counteract it and to try and change the narrative, not in a sales and marketing sort of way, but just, as you said, to show evidence and show what's true as opposed to what people are hearing, which quite often isn't true.